welcome to Cleave to Antiquity. My name is Ben, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Father Sebastian. How are you doing today?
Thank God. Thank God. May the Lord bless.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very excited for this show. I saw a video that you had done on your channel where you were kind of breaking down some I guess deficiencies within Protestantism and so on and so forth, and I really liked a lot of the things that you had to say. I believe you were also on what was that podcast, The Roots of Orthodoxy? Is that correct?
Yeah, I've got a feedback issue going on my end now that we're live. So, what's going on here?
Oh, no worries.
Let's see here. Yeah, it's strange. It wasn't a problem beforehand. Any ideas what happened there?
No, maybe you can turn your volume down on your side or something if it's echoing. Chat, let me know if there's an echo on your end. Do you have an echo at all? Question mark. Any echo? Let me know how the sound. Ben is a boomer. So true. So true. How's it sound, guys? Let me know. Is it still echoing for you, Father?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. I'm gonna go grab a headphone device here. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, everybody's saying no echo. Completely fine. Anyway, so I'm gonna have him introduce himself when he gets back, but I just want to talk a little bit about. Oh man, my camera's kind of like low. Let me do this. There you go. Nice. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. I want to talk about the conference that I went to this last week. Was really cool. Got to go to Divine Liturgy, where His Eminence Metropolitan Jonah was serving the Divine Liturgy. That was really cool. That was the first liturgy I'd been to with any bishop or anything like that, and that was really awesome to be able to see. Oh, it might be on Cleve's side. No, I don't hear an echo. Father was saying you heard an echo. How's it sound now? Does it sound all right?
I think it sounds good now. Yeah, now it sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Just give me 1 second.
All right.
Okay, yeah, everybody says it's good. It's good. It's good. All right, cool. Awesome. So yeah, the conference went really well. Got to go to Divine Liturgy where Metropolitan Jonah served. That was really awesome to see. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. I will tell you all a funny story before we get started. So I had met Father Hears for the first time in person. He's very tall. He's a very austere presence. he's got a very large presence. He's a tall. Oh, you joined twice, Father Sebastian.
Yeah, I'm getting out of my other browser. It's giving me issues again. So I'm going to close out of the browser and see if it works better in a different browser.
Okay.
Let's see about that.
Is that better?
All right, is that better? Let's see.
Yeah. Everybody's saying it's good on their end.
Okay, there's that.
So anyway, I meet Father Hears for the first time, and I didn't know how to to ask for their blessing or anything like that. So I stick my hand out like this to shake his hand. And he goes and he shakes my hand, like grabs my elbow, goes in like that. I'm like, did I accidentally dap up Father Years? So I'm sitting there I'm like, oh no, what did I do? And then I see Metropolitan Jonah walk into the room. I'm like, I'm gonna go hug the wall. So I don't embarrass myself any further. But it was a good time. It was an awesome conference. Excellent to be able to hang out with everybody, and yeah, it was awesome. So Father Sebastian, are you all set up on your end there?
I think so. How's that working? You hear me all right now?
Kind of lagging a little bit.
That's the problem. It was lagging beforehand, so that's what was happening beforehand. I was getting everything latent. So I don't know if it's our internet. I live out in the woods a little bit, and so we run off a satellite. It's Starlink. So sometimes, depending on what's going on, it can be a problem. But hopefully, I mean, last couple times I've done this, it's been all right. So
okay.
Is it still?
No worries. Well, we'll just roll with it.
Sounds good.
So,
right.
Do you mind just introducing yourself, Father, and talking a little bit about what you do, and
Sure.
you know, I guess you have a couple of different interviews and things like that. Maybe you could bring that up as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think you were saying when I started having issues, I was on the Roots of Orthodoxy. Did a couple of podcasts with Jonathan over there, and that was wonderful. Also, too, I do have my own channel, Orthodoxy in the Trenches, that I do a lot more specialized. The Roots videos were kind of general, and it was my kind of my story, and they were enjoyable to do, and I think there's definitely been they've been well received. But for my own channel, I try to take a little more bite-sized style topics, and I'm really focused. My real focus as a ministry online is on living orthodoxy. I get a little bit into the apologetics, but my real focus, my real emphasis and interest is in how to live orthodoxy today. That's my real focus. So anyway, that's my ministry. We have a parish in Cornville, Arizona, which is outside of Sedona. For anybody who's familiar with the area, it's a very, very beautiful area, and I'm very blessed to live here with my family. And yeah, we're just getting away. The parish is fairly new, and we started this ministry about the time that I moved up here, so less than a year. So I've only had a channel for about I've been producing videos for about 7 months now. So, and just got monetization here 2 days ago, so I'm fully monetized now on my channel. So thank God. Is that working okay on your end?
Let me do this.
Okay.
I'm kind of lagging out on my end. Let me see if I.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm hearing feedback on your end, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. There you go. Let's try that.
All right.
That should be good.
I don't think there's been a single one of these that I've been on that's just been smooth. So anyway, now I got your leg. So anyway, we'll just push through. I'll do the best I can. It's hard because I'm super ADHD. So when I hear myself talking, it does confuse me. But I'll do the best I can.
Yeah, it's still bugging out.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else I can do on my end. I've cut everything else out, so there's nothing else drawing internet, and it looks like, as far as I can tell, my service is as good here as it's going to get. Is anybody else reporting? I don't see the chat. Is anybody else reporting it out there? Are they hearing? Is it just you and I?
Well, let's
That
see. Hold
sound
on.
okay? Sounds good on my end now.
Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, I think there's a bit of lag or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what's
type
going
one.
on.
Type one if Cleve is a boomer. That's funny. I've never had an issue with doing one of these live streams. It's kind of interesting. I was like, I don't know if it's I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem like I have pretty high speed internet at my
Yeah,
place,
it's
so
probably on
kind of
my end.
interesting.
Yeah, it's probably my man. I'm running Starlink. Like I said, because I'm out in the boonies. So, but I don't know. I mean, if it's not, is the audience hearing it? Is it just you and I that are hearing it?
No,
Just us.
I've got it going live on my phone too to see what the deal is,
Mhm.
but it's lagging. I can't see what the deal is, but let's see if it evens out or something. If not, then we'll have to see what we can do.
Okay.
Well, we'll go ahead and talk about what you wanted to speak about at the beginning, and we'll see
Okay.
see how it goes.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to cover tonight is really the spiritual dimension um, that differentiates Catholicism and Protestantism primarily from Orthodoxy. I think the doctrinal side of this discussion has been hammered out very well by many qualified people online. I think that's there's a lot of good information out there. But what for myself, um, what matters, I guess, most to me, what I think matters the most, honestly, is someone's disposition going into these discussions. Not that the content isn't important, of course, but the problem is that disposition or attitude is what's going to influence and sort of filter the whole discussion. So if you're going into discussion, for example, trying to prove that you're right rather than honestly pursuing the truth, that's going to be a different type of discussion, right, between those two dispositions. And so one of the things that I see in a lot of these apologetics debates is people are going in it to win. And I certainly understand that. I understand, obviously, people are attached to their side. They love their faith and they want to defend it. So I mean, it's perfectly understandable. But the unfortunate part is that when somebody goes into one of these discussions without respect for the other party, at least as a person, right? You don't have to respect their position necessarily, okay, if it's completely off, but you certainly have to respect the person, who's created also in the image and likeness of God, and who is someone that God wants to save as well, right? God wants all of us to be saved. And so I think one's disposition coming into these discussions, when you're just looking at it as my side is right and I want to beat you down with the truth, right? The hammer of heresy. I mean, there is a place for that, but not in these kinds of discussions, I don't think. I mean, when you have a legitimate heretic, when you have, like, when you read the fathers where they're condemning somebody, what you don't typically get from that, or you don't realize necessarily, is how many things were done before it got to that stage, right? The initial interactions that the church fathers had, even with heresiarchs like Nestorius, with Cyprian, if you read that exchange sometime, the first letter was very polite. And so what people don't understand when they talk about heretics, as such, I mean, these are people, when the church says not to pray with heretics, it has a very specific meaning. I'm not saying, of course, that we just pray with heterodox, but, God forbid. I'm just saying that what is intended there, what we mean by a heretic, is somebody who has gone through the whole process and has been, formally censured, formally, anathematized. And so anyway, so when they're very rude to them, when could be classified by modern standards at least as rude, there's a whole context there that's missing in modern debate. People are ready to just go right to that. Oh, well, they're heretics, so I can speak to them whenever I want. That's just not, it's not correct. And and I think what really determines that mostly is spiritual disposition. So um, as a Protestant, let's start with that. I find personally in my own ministry that evangelicals are really the hardest ones to have religious discussions with, the hardest ones to convert, if you want to think of it in those terms, because they already believe they have the truth. They have the Bible. They believe the Bible to be the sole rule of faith, and their interpretation of it is absolute, and there's no openness to anything else. So you can understand that if that's the disposition that somebody goes into one of these debates, there's not going to be much, right, that you can get through. It's a wall. That person has placed up a wall that you're really not going to be able to get through. They're not interested in the truth. I guess that's my point. So I would say for anybody that wants to engage these discussions, and the truth, the same would be for Catholics as well, right? I mean, it's a little bit different because Catholics, I would say, have a greater claim to the truth really than Protestants do, in the sense at least their church goes back to the beginning, goes back to the source. It's a lot closer, to Orthodoxy. But either way, there needs to be any of these discussions that happen, regardless of where they're coming from, they need to be pursued in a spirit of humility. And I know people sometimes don't like to hear that, and they don't like to hear me. I harp on it a lot, okay, because it's something that over the course of my lifetime, I have come to understand it's really the basis of everything. If you don't have humility, you can't have faith, you can't have hope, you can't have charity, you can't have courage, you can't really anything. Humility is what, when I say humility, I should probably define that. What I mean by it is humility is truth. It's seeing yourself as God sees you, seeing yourself as you are, and being open, right? Basically being open to the things that God is willing to teach you and guide you with, right? It's not putting a wall up. It's not saying, I know. Even as a priest who has this commission, by my ordination to teach, nevertheless, I'm always, I need to go into things with an understanding that, the mysteries of our faith they're unfathomable ultimately. I mean, elements of them are, and so Matt, you could devote your whole life to studying the faith and never know everything that's there. So we should always approach it with that attitude that we're all seekers. In one sense, we're all wanting to discern the truth, and in discerning the truth, then living by the truth. That's why the original name of my channel was Truth and Practice, right? Is trying to, understand what is real. By truth, we just mean that the reality that God has created, and then conforming ourselves to that reality. Okay, I've recently shifted now, or I am in the process of shifting to Orthodoxy in the trenches, because I'm finding that people, I think the societal programming has been such that people, the concept of truth is not really something that people appreciate to in the way that they should. And also too, as far as distinguishing my ministry from others, I really focus more on kind of the essentials. I try to focus on the essentials that are relevant to everyone. And so that's kind of how my channel's distinguished maybe from others. But anyway, I'd say just going into it, that's the underlying component, is that people need to approach it with the right spirit and not go into it with the idea that I'm gonna go teach this guy. I'm gonna go into it to teach this guy. Look, the truth doesn't fear error. I'll just end on this. The truth doesn't fear error. If you have the truth, it will rise to the top. It will manifest itself because it's inherent in reality. Truth is just a recognition of reality. Okay, so in acknowledging and recognizing, acknowledging that reality, looking at what is, right, and then seeing it as is, that's the humility part, then we can really get somewhere in this discussion. Then these kinds of discussions can be meaningful as people work towards that mutual understanding. And from the Orthodox perspective, we have to do the same thing too. We have to be willing to not like recognize somebody's disposition. If somebody, for example, isn't coming to us in an honest spirit, right, and they just want to create problems, well, then it's maybe not worth our efforts either to be involved in those discussions, because once again, they're not looking for answers; they're just looking to make a point, right? They have an agenda or an axe to grind. So, anyway, that'd be the baseline. I would start with that. So, where would you like to go from there?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely on the money. Like we need humility. One of the things that I say often is like in a debate, it's rarely ever, it seems like it's rarely ever that you're going to win the individual that you're debating with. It's usually for the audience. But even if you're going to engage in that, right? If you I think it certainly, at least my approach has always been somewhat. Sometimes I don't ever use foul language or anything like that, but sometimes I get right to the point. And I think for that is just to make it clear to the audience whether or not, and obviously I'm not engaging in debates at this point in time, but when I did, make it clear enough for the audience to understand. Because usually the people that are discussing, it's like me, like if I'm debating Bobby or something, usually Bobby understands my position or his position, unless it's like just, I don't know, some like random off the street that I'm talking with. But if it's a professional debate, he's going to understand my position. So my job would then be to articulate things in such a clear way that the person in the audience can understand what the position is and why that person's position is deficient. I think, a lot of times, I think it's the mark of somebody who does that job well to be able to, I don't know, kind of do that without, I don't know. You get what I'm saying?
We have to
9 times
speak,
out of 10, the point of the debate is for the audience. Sorry.
yeah, we have to speak the truth in love, right? That's the key point. We have to speak the truth in love. And so even if, to your point, I mean, I obviously completely agree that these debates are usually for the people watching it rather than the one that you're debating. But still, if we don't enter that debate in the proper spirit, right? In Orthodoxy, like one of the huge distinctions, and I think we could maybe address this briefly, is for us, and this is something I didn't get at all. I never experienced this until I was Orthodox, is that in the Western world, we tend to see things in terms of dichotomies, this versus that. And we also tend to, because it's a categorical way of thinking, right? It's like we're trying to separate all the different components. But, I've said this elsewhere, but the Orthodox spirit is that of both and, right? We try to integrate these things. But one specific manifestation of this phenomena is where we can't only do the right thing. Like as a traditional Catholic, the emphasis was always on what you did, right? It was only really on that. It was only about what you said, maybe as well, if you said something that was, inappropriate, but said within the context of action. For Orthodox Christians, we go deeper than that. For us, it's not about just what we do, but it's about, why we do it. And in terms of this point of the conversation, the spirit in which we do it. So if I engage in a debate, for example, it isn't just the fact of what I'm saying, right? But it's what is my heart in this? Am I approaching in a manner that has love, right? Christian love for the person I'm debating, or am I going into it to like lop his head off, right? So I mean, and a lot of debates, honestly, from the standpoint of the people in the audience, the few that I have watched, people tend a lot of times to side with the person that is maybe not actually the better debater, like in terms of his arguments, but the one who maintains his cool. And I'm not going to cite any examples, but I'm sure, you're aware of some of the more famous ones where people lost their cool. And then even though they had the superior argument, the audience tended to side with the other side, right? So, this isn't to judge anybody or to criticize anyone. It's just to put on us the importance of entering it with the right spirit. If we can't go into the debate with the right spirit, to, once again, from the idea that we've been given this gift of faith, because faith is a gift. We've been given this gift. We want to share it with somebody. And if they want to receive it, glory to God. If they don't want to receive that, well, we still pray for them and hope at some point they'll be ready to receive it, right? But if it's anything more than that, I think we really are starting to tread into dangerous territory for our own soul, at least, and maybe that of others.
I think, what are your thoughts on this? Because in any debate, you have to be able to use rhetoric.
Mhm.
So obviously, I know we don't want to. There's always going to be some level of pushback if somebody is an aggressive debater, but I don't believe Christianity is just a religion of like being nice for the sake of
No,
being
I'm
nice.
not
That
saying that.
seems to me to be more of like a puritanical approach, and I've experienced that from a lot of different people who flat out despise debate of any form and will look at somebody who does a debate. Granted, again, reminder for the audience, I'm not engaging in any kind of debate at this point. I've kind of set that off to the wayside, but I've noticed there is especially in our more modern times, as orthodoxy becomes more and more prevalent. There's a lot more online evangelism. There's a lot more people finding out about the faith. So people that are entering into the church maybe from more of a Protestant background, or they're noticing all of these new people coming into the church, and maybe they're being frustrated by some of the baggage that they have, and they're saying, well, look at the approach of these individuals engaging in debates. It's attracting a certain type of person into the church. So people are pushing back on, I think, the online debate scene. But what do you think? What do you think about? Because one of the things that I notice, like, honestly, I'll just be very transparent.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think uh, kind of bothers me a little bit is particularly within the Orthodox circles. I notice like there's a lot of pushback on debate rhetoric if it's direct and to the point, even if it's not overly rude. It's just like, well, we don't like debates because debates period are mean. What are your thoughts on like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I love it. All right. So, first of all, being direct, I no issues. I think that's appropriate and exactly the way it should be done. There's no reason to. These are important things, and there's no reason to beat around the bush. So we're in a complete agreement on that. No issues whatsoever. And I also want to address this fallacy of meekness equaling weakness. Right? Meekness does not equal weakness, and unfortunately, and so one of the big things that I'm planning to do on my channel, truth, it's Father Sebastian dash Orthodoxy in the trenches. But one of the things I'm focused on moving forward, the next thing I'm going to start working on is really addressing the virtues and vices, really focusing on what it means to live, and because it's really important. There's a lot of misunderstandings there. People have not been formed well, unfortunately, and especially I would say in Orthodox circles, we've not done a great job in educating people on this. But to your point, the meekness in this regard isn't passivity. Okay, it's not, oh, we just throw our hands up and let people abuse us or trounce on our faith. I mean, there is a time to fight for sure. But what I guess I'm getting at is that, from the standpoint, one of the things I learned at Thomas Aquinas College when I attended there, one of the things I took away from that is remaining cool, not arguing out of a sense of passion. They were very good at that. That you remain on a cold intellectual level, and you don't take the arguments personal. That's one element. I wouldn't say that's the main thing, but that is one element. Is that when we're in these debates, we can't be passionate about it in the sense like simply passionate. We can be passionate for the truth. We can love the truth, passionate in the sense that we love the truth. Okay, but when we talk about passion, usually in the Orthodox context, it refers to sinful passion, right? I'm getting angered. I'm getting out of my element. And just briefly to speak to this from the perspective of a warrior, because I don't talk about this a whole lot, but I did a lot of things before I was a priest. I was in the Marine Corps. I was a former cop. I've spent 7 years as a security contractor overseas. I did a lot of things. So I was involved in that world for a long time, most of my life. And it's interesting because there are tremendous parallels between the life of a warrior and obviously the life of a Christian. And one of those is not acting out of passion. They understand that. That like your decisions, what you're doing can't be done out of the sinful passion, out of anger or rage, right? They would understand, and it's actually one of the techniques that they can use to get the person to make a mistake by getting them angry, right? This is one of the techniques that you can use, like in martial arts or something. So my point is that we should always we need to maintain that high level and not forget that a debate, truly any discussion, any interaction we have with somebody is not simply an intellectual affair, right? This is something that's hard for us in the West to understand, but it should be primarily a spiritual one, right? When we talk about utilizing, yes, we utilize the intellect. Obviously, the fathers did this when they wrote their defenses of things. Of course, this is one of our faculties, and we're absolutely not opposed to it. We're not anti-reason, as some people sometimes falsely accuse us of. It's that we understand that reason is limited. Reason is not our highest faculty, not in the sense that the West understands it. When we say that the intellect is the highest faculty in Orthodox teaching, what we mean is the noetic intellect, the nous. The rational intellect or the discursive intellect is below that. And this is one of the huge problems with these debates between East and West, people from the East and people from the West, Orthodox and Catholics and Protestants, is that we're not operating on the same level. What matters most to us is the experience of God, okay? Not the intellectualization of that experience, okay? It has its place, right? It has its place, but that place is subjugated, right? It's below, subordinate to the place that the noetic, that part of us that directly receives God, that gives us that where we receive and experience God directly in his energies, right? Because Catholics have no, well, at least the Western Church, I realize the Byzantines are sort of adopting this now and spreading it to the Catholic Church, but it's our theology. It's not their theology. It's that theology of the energies was condemned for many centuries. It's only not recently that it's coming into play again. But my point here is that this is a spiritual thing too. If we are not in the right spiritual place to have this debate, we shouldn't be having the debate, because it's damaging for us on a spiritual level if we go into it with the wrong spirit. So it's nothing to take away anything from what you're saying. You're absolutely correct that there are things worth defending and fighting for. Absolutely. And we're not, and one of the things I am actually a proponent of is getting more involved in things like speaking the truth, but speaking it in love, right? Like not allowing this rampant heresy, like to actually confront it when experienced. We should do that if we're in a position to be able to do it in a manner that it doesn't affect harm to us or those who we're speaking to. And by harm to others, I'm not saying telling them what they want to hear. Like, it might be a heated discussion, okay? Sometimes that's necessary, but we really should focus on making sure that we ourselves are not acting out of sinful passion. That is the point in all of this. If we are, even what we're saying will be tainted by that. And the fathers are very clear about this. This is it's not a debatable thing. Like, this is something the fathers are very clear about. So,
Sure. Looking at this explosion of interest in orthodoxy, we're talking about debates and things like that. I mean, I think we could both definitely concede that they certainly have a role in people
They do.
becoming interested in the Orthodox faith. I mean, I came from a debate background. I don't know if you're familiar with any of my work prior to this, but I was a Protestant. And I did multiple different debates, some with Catholic linguistic scholars like Dr. Trent Doherty, so on and so forth. Could go through certain people or whatever that I've interacted with in the past, and I've kind of taken a step back from that, and we're going on a learning journey into Orthodoxy. So I think we can probably both concede that, at least in the modern context, debate has been very important and kind of leading the forefront, especially online. The presence that the Orthodox have in the debate sphere right now really does seem to be driving interest in Orthodoxy. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that statement, and I agree with the overall arching theme that it is necessary. If I would have any, I guess, critique of that, and please nobody take this the wrong way, but like, I mean, it should be limited. I think it should be limited somewhat. Like, something to understand, for example, is me as a priest. I'm subject to a bishop, right? So I'm accountable. I have, if I say things that are off, I'm going to be reprimanded at least. I'm going to be potentially censored. There is a certain degree of order and hierarchy that needs to be present in this. And so I would just say that some have done great work, but not necessarily all have, if that makes sense. And I don't say, once again, as a criticism of anybody. I think their hearts, probably, I don't know enough of them, to be honest with you. I mean, I see different things, but like, look, this is, I have I have a lot of different things going on, and unfortunately I don't really have the time to watch many of these things. I've seen a few here and there, but I just know, once again, on a principle level here, if somebody's not approaching it in the right spirit and doesn't have maybe the right capabilities, that would be a second part, though haven't seen that to be the case. Most of the people that are debating are competent. Like, they have a fair amount of knowledge of their subject. I haven't seen that to be the bigger issue. The bigger issue is that they approach it maybe in the wrong spirit because they're not mature enough in the faith. Like, if somebody, and that's why I understand you're probably not debating right now, because, I'll be honest, I don't know how many people have said this out there. Maybe somebody's saying it and I just haven't caught it, but in the Orthodox world, we're not even supposed to be, to go to seminary and to have been Orthodox for about 10 years. That's how long it took. That's the norm. The norm is 10 years as an Orthodox Christian before you even go to seminary, because what people don't grasp is Orthodoxy is much more than the intellectual understanding of our faith, right? Our faith is a lived faith. Okay. It is not it's not an intellectual faith. It's a known faith, right? Faith for us is not intellectual assent that we get through syllogistic reasoning. Okay. That's a Western ideal. That's not how we see it in Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy, it's a faith. Our faith is a gift from God. It's an experience of the divine that completely transfigures the person if they're, faithful to the faith, so to speak. If they embrace that faith wholly, that's what makes them holy, right? And so, in that context, right, you just see it's a different thing. If somebody's not entering it, once again, with the right spirit, then they're potentially doing more damage to themselves and potentially those who listen to them. And there's been evidence of that too, right? I mean, the evidence certainly that many people are coming in. There's no way to have discussion without mentioning Jay Dyer. A majority of people, many people that come to our churches, come to my churches, were brought in through Jay Dyer. So I really appreciate the work he's doing, for sure. But on the other hand, there's others who come in and they have sort of the wrong spirit, and they're not they're not coming to us with the right spirit, right? And so then they don't stick it out. And that's a problem. Like, people should understand that this isn't, you're not coming into orthodoxy because it supports your, your political sense, or, just because it even makes sense. I mean, that's a part of it. That's fine to sort of enter, but like, you have to mature beyond that. And it takes a long time. You don't realize how many things are different. Like just take like the Theotokos, or take original sin. I mean, these are wildly different concepts between the Catholic world and the Orthodox world, that has all kinds of theological consequences on things like the Immaculate Conception and purgatory and all these different things, like, that come about because the original idea, right, the idea starting point of original sin is different. And so it takes a long time to recalibrate your thinking, right, and to adopt a different worldview that honestly you just won't understand until you do it. Like, I hate to say it, but Orthodoxy, honestly, when it comes right down to it, it's a faith that has to be lived, and you're not going to get it until you live it. That's just the truth. You can get parts of it. You can, oh, that makes sense, or the liturgy is beautiful. I mean, those are all true things, but it's living the faith that makes you Orthodox, not studying it in books, not talking about it with people. This is the thing that I just think it gets lost a lot in the internet world. And like I said, there's a lot of good coming out of it, but there is also, we have to be honest, there's some things that are not good that are coming out of it too. And so I'm appreciative of the fact that Orthodoxy has come into the mainstream, so to speak. But we have to make sure that we're just stewards of it. I mean, I've read lots of comments. One thing I have done is I've read comments on some of these videos. I don't have time to watch them. A lot of times, but I'll read the comments to them, and a lot of people are turned off to Orthodoxy, frankly, because of what they see in some of the debaters that is very off-putting. Now, am I saying they should do that? Of course not. I mean, we should also be mature enough to not let somebody who's debating the faith, right, like, leave the faith because they didn't like how it was debated, right? Okay.
Yeah, to be fair, in a lot of those debates, a lot of those comments that say that are half the time, because I've kind of engaged in this world for a while. Half the time, a lot of those are alts of one of the individuals that are doing the debating to try to swing the opinion in the other direction.
Yeah.
Or it's somebody who's already made up their mind and they don't have an actual argument, so their argument is, well, this person seemed mean or something. Because they know somebody's going to read that and they're going to say, well, regardless of whatever they said, the person's impression is this person's mean. I think that happens in almost every debate, formal or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's
I remember there was one that I had engaged in, and this is, I think these are all good points to discuss. Well, I remember one that I engaged in that was with linguistic scholar Dr. Trent Doherty, who's a Roman Catholic. He taught, I forget which college he taught at, but we were discussing Vatican II. This was back when I was a Protestant. We were discussing Vatican II, and his position was that Muslims and Roman Catholics worship the same God. You would say Christians and Muslims worship the same God. And my position was no, that's not the case.
Yeah, they don't.
And I remember we were engaging in this discussion, and I had basically stated very plainly, his debate partner was an atheist gentleman, and I said, well, I forget which passage of scripture I had read through, but I said basically the fruits of radical ecumenism is that you're willing to partner with this atheist who, in the middle of the debate, had changed his name to just to like kind of mock us a little bit. Had changed his name to bisexual atheist in the middle of the debate. I said, this is the fruit of radical ecumenism.
Yeah.
You've adopted Vatican II, so you're comfortable defending your theology with this gentleman. And I remember there was and I was very straightforward and nice and kind of, I mean, I didn't even deliver it with a bunch of force, but I remember in the comments, this was like the meanest thing you could have said, like just pointing out the obvious truth is like the meanest thing you could say. So I think there's certainly always two sides to that coin. There's always going to be like rhetorical, I don't know, to being straightforward. But then there's also going to be the kind of after debate trying to skew the optics. No, my side won, or your side was way too mean or something. I think that's always the case. My fear,
that's fair.
I think this will be an interesting kind of segue into this conversation, because this is a good subject. My fear, and something that I've noticed, is I think as we see, this is my kind of just thinking out loud here. I've noticed a lot of pushback, especially, maybe not particularly on my channel, because I just do these interviews now. But I've noticed some pushback, especially in person, or maybe with some of the older, I guess, converts that aren't necessarily used to seeing the number of people that are entering into the churches, and these people are entering in broken. They're entering in needing healing. They're entering in with all sorts of number of issues that maybe they're not used to seeing. And I've noticed this is being attributed to, well, these people are coming from online evangelization, so the online evangelization needs to stop, or maybe the debate culture needs to stop, or maybe it's this part of the internet or that part of the internet. From what I see is that it's just it seems like we're dealing with so many people and they're so broken, and now they're finally entering into the hospital for sinners. What do you think about that? Because I've kind of noticed commentary in that direction.
Yeah, no, and I'm in complete agreement with you on the we should never have that attitude, and I certainly don't. In my parish, it's a new parish, and we have more converts now than we have Cradle Orthodox. We've already, even in the year that we've been doing it, we've already pretty much tipped the balance there. So no, these are the future of the church, and it's not what I'm referring to. I mean, I want to be clear that I think probably the biggest way, one of the things about the Western world, because like I say it, I think it's worth, because we all suffer from this. Even now, being Orthodox as long as I have to remind myself all the time that things don't exist in a diametric way, right? In Orthodox, we pursue the royal path, which is neither extreme. Okay, it's not this extreme or that extreme. And the other part is, one of the outcomes of that, fruits of that is we get a lot of false dichotomies get set up, right? So it's not fair to say, like, to go back to your earlier point here, and that is one not getting angry, right, is not the same thing as one being unwilling to defend the truth. Okay, those are not the same thing. Those are not, there's a false equivalency there, right? What I'm saying is, I think probably the best way to think of that is actually a quote from Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton, about war, about the soldier. He says that some words to the effect that the Christian soldier, the righteous soldier, fights not out of hatred for what lies before him, but out of love for what's behind him, right? He fights out of love for the people he defends, not out of hatred of his enemy. You see the difference? So that's when I'm saying we enter debate. It is a battle of sorts, right? It's an intellectual battle. So I'm just saying, it's not that we're not fighting the fight. We are fighting the fight, but we're fighting out of a spirit of love, right, for everybody involved, rather than one of, trying to win at all costs. That's the difference. And it requires a certain degree, once again, of spiritual maturity and just confidence, maybe. I don't know, like lack of a better term. If you have a guy who's really, really competent, who's really capable, he doesn't have to talk about what he does. The most effective guys that I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some very high level guys, these are not guys that go around telling you all the things that they've done, right? They don't mention, oh, I did this, I did that, right? They tend to just, oh yeah, okay, I did that, whatever. Like, they don't go into it because they don't have nothing to prove. Like, they've proven themselves, right? So I think a good debater is somebody that is confident, is rooted in these truths, and he just expresses them. They come out of him, right? But you're right, to your point, I don't disagree whatsoever. I think you're completely right that we have to defend the truth, for sure. We defend it to whatever degree we are capable of. But once again, if we fall into sin to do it, we've still lost, right? This is the point, is that we can't look at it just from an external perspective, but we have to tie in the internal, right? If I win the debate, right, but fall into sin in the process, I've still lost, right? That's the Orthodox. That's a different way that we see things. We don't look at the world in terms of the externals. We look at the internal, the immaterial, right? The spiritual dimension. And so to say that we're looking at the spiritual dimension doesn't mean we ignore the fact that I believe that the soul is higher than the body. Doesn't mean that I think the body isn't important, right? Every element of our being, body, soul, and spirit, are all important. We're not disembodied souls, and we're not just bodies, right? The Orthodox mindset framework of thinking, right, to use the term, the phronema, right, but our worldview, a framework of thinking, incorporates all these different elements and doesn't look at them as like separate. So to your point, yes, we should defend it, but we should defend it in the proper spirit. That's all I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a good discussion. I'm
Yes.
kind of glad we were able to do a little bit of back and
Yeah.
forth on that, because
Yeah,
I think
love it.
that's definitely helpful. And I'm
Thank God.
It's interesting that you hear that you'd stated, you hear the inquirers and everybody saying they're coming from Jay's channel. I've definitely heard that the same at my local church as
Oh, for
well.
sure.
So
Oh, yeah.
I definitely think we should keep him in prayer for sure.
Definitely.
I'm sure
Definitely.
that's
Yes.
God, no matter what, it seems like God is certainly using Jay. I appreciate Jay's work,
Indeed.
as well as Father Deacon Ananias, who was in the chat
Oh, yeah. All right.
as
Right on.
well.
Hello, Father Deacon. Yeah, I
Uh,
did a live stream with him. That was great.
yeah, FDA is awesome. I got
Yes.
to hear him play. I think it was a guitar,
Oh,
but
nice.
they were playing some music after the conference. That was kind of cool.
That is cool.
All right, so I think this will be a good segue into our Q&A section, if that's all right, Father.
Sure. Somebody wants to, whatever you want to go into. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions here. I'll just go ahead and I'll pull up some of the super chats people have sent in already. Contemporary Compendium, $10. It's Cleveland time. Hey, welcome to the show. Appreciate you. X-Type Gaming, $10. You had sent in a question. This was regarding the debate that Daniel Hikikachu had engaged in on modern day debate at DebateCon. Canon 54, the Council of Trullo, that would be the reference for that ban on cousin marriage. If you guys are confused for context, go and watch that debate. It was at DebateCon. This was between Daniel Hikikachu and Andrew Wilson. So yeah, that would be the canon there. You'd asked a question about, is this directly found in the scripture? No, but that's not necessarily the framework, right? This is a canon and an ecumenical council. Let's see. Where were the other? OrthoCat, $10. Great work from Father Sebastian and Cleve. Father is a wonderful priest with a great ministry. Keep it up. Glory to God.
Glory to God.
How do y'all handle Christmas? What are the appropriate ways to celebrate with Protestant and Roman Catholic families?
This is one of those things that is tough for everyone. It's tough for all of us, there are different approaches to it. Obviously we have to love everyone, in a Christ-like spirit of love is what I mean, of course. But we have to also be careful, we have to be careful. It's easy for me as a priest, so it's kind of an unfair advantage because I'm the priest. I'm going to say the prayers. So, if there's ever family gatherings, but, yeah, this is something that really you need to take up with your spiritual father and have a longer discussion with it. It's very much circumstance dependent. It depends on a number of factors, but what I would just say that the overriding principle here is that, like, the two things that we have to not do is compromise our faith, and offer a bad example, right? So this is the challenge. And I wish I could give a better answer on that. This is something that I think everybody struggles with to some degree, and there are wide variance of opinions on it. And I would just be giving one more if I were to give mine. So this is not a hard fast thing. I would just say, I guess I would offer anything is, I think we do need to distinguish between the heterodox and actual heretics, right? An actual heretic is somebody who has rejected the faith outright, and but by the same token, it's so easy to fall into ecumenism. I did a video on that whole subject on my channel if anyone wants to check that out. So we have to be very careful because we definitely don't want to fall into an ecumenistic idea. There is a difference. We can never forget the difference, even if there's an acknowledgement of these things we hold in common. It can't just stay there. The conversations have to, we have to be clear that there's a difference there. And so the safest course is just not to pray with them, okay, but to still have interactions with them. That's what I would personally do. But once again, that's my opinion, and you could probably ask different priests, and they would give you a different opinion on that. So, sorry, I wish I could answer that better, but that's a pretty tough one, honestly.
Yeah, what do you think? Do you mind if I explore this a little bit? Just
Sure.
just a little bit. So you're mentioning prayer. So if you are the one saying the prayer, say over the meal or whatever, you're not engaging in, I don't know, somebody who's
Prayer with heretics.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
If you are the one saying the prayer and you're praying over, that's different than
Yes.
yeah, basically. Yeah. So I guess the best way to go would be say offer to do the prayer.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's easier said than done, because obviously in my case I'm a priest, so I'm going to be doing it. It's also, if it's at your house, the man of the house is usually going to be the one to say the prayers. But What if you're visiting at your father's house, right? Now it becomes more complicated. You're not a priest. This is something you have to work out. And like I say, I would work it out with everybody should have a spiritual father that they can run through this. And because the spiritual father is going to have more context. See, part of the thing and I think bears worth discussing here briefly, is one of the dissatisfying things for people that come about Orthodoxy from people coming from a Catholic background is that we don't oftentimes give these hard and fast answers on things. Is this a sin? Is this not a sin? Well, yes, there are things that are always a sin. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but we also tend to look at things more from the perspective of the person's perspective, because not everything is a sin for every person, right? Some people can do certain things and not be harmed by it, while others cannot, right? And so we don't have just one. There's objective truths, but then there are the standards. And even like back on the issue of the canons, for example, the canons, obviously they're very important. We can't just dispense with them on the one side of it. But on the other side of it, we have to understand that the canons are for the bishops to decide how. Canon just means standard, right? It's a rule, okay? It's a standard by which we judge. And the bishop gets to decide to what degree of rigidity he wants to apply that standard within his diocese, okay? Within his, the territory he's responsible for. So there are certain canons that are not followed necessarily today. And from a Catholic perspective, oh, well, that invalidates the church. Well, no, because we don't function in the way that the Catholic model of church is, right? The church understands that there's an ideal, and then there's where people are. And the goal is to try to bring people from where they are to that ideal. And there are times when applying the standard in an absolute sense would be more harmful to somebody's soul than to work with them where they are to try to get them to that standard, right? So, once again, from a Western mind that just wants black and white truths, boom, 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 this or that, that's not satisfying. And I think that's actually an obstacle for some people to join. But like having experienced both sides of that, both as a Catholic and an Orthodox, and as a layperson and a priest, there are tremendous advantages to the Orthodox position, because I know for a fact how many people have been harmed, myself included, under the Catholic model, where there's not an understanding of the person. I use the analogy frequently, just in my last video I posted today, about weightlifting. If everybody should be able to lift, right, their body weight, we'll say, right, if that's the standard, you should be able to lift your body weight. Well, not everybody can do that. So if you throw up, okay, if I weigh 200 pounds, right, and I throw 200 pounds and I can't lift 200 pounds, say I can only lift whatever, 135 or something, I'm going to harm myself, right? I can't lift that. I have to work up to it. So I lift what I can. If I can do 135, I do that, and I build up to that 200 pounds or whatever, right? So that's the same thing here as a priest. The pastoral approach is to learn the person, to know the person. And that's why it's so important to have a spiritual father, because they can know you. I, as a priest on the internet, can't tell you, right? I don't know you. I can give some general advice, but I can't really tell you what to do, because I don't know you. I don't know what's good for you. And that's why I spend so much time with my own parishioners, hearing their confessions and discussing their issues, so that I can offer effective strategies for them, by the grace of God, of course, speaking, to them through me. And so I guess just to wrap up this thought, if you're, as a Catholic, as a traditional Catholic, I could go to 10 different priests there and go to them and ask, hey, I'm have this sin, and they would give me the same advice pretty much, because they're very methodological. It's like they have their spiritual DSM, right? And they're just like, okay, for this sin, this is what you do. It doesn't work though. It doesn't work, because you stay in sin. With the Orthodox approach, we'll try different things. I can literally I've mentioned this elsewhere, but I can have people come to me, and it's what I'm inspired in that moment by the Holy Spirit to say to that person. In some cases, I can have two people confess the same sin, and I'll give them completely different advice, because that advice is to the person. It's for their sake alone. And just a side note, that's why we oftentimes shouldn't. People have a tendency to sometimes to talk about their confessions. Oh, Father said I had this problem and he told me to do this. Well, that advice was for you specifically. It's not universal for everyone. Just a fair point there. So anyway.
Yeah, you could go to the doctor and say, I had it's me and my buddy are both experiencing pain. I had a horrific horrific back injury. I needed the doctor recommended back surgery. Well, that might work good for your toothache. Let me,
kind of, yeah.
Why
Right.
don't you get back surgery and see if that helps your toothache?
Yeah, right.
But I think that's a good way to break down economia and acrovia and rigidity of the law, as well as kind of the ability of the bishops to apply canons. So that's interesting. Let's see. Here's another super chat here. Father Sebastian is a great man and a great spiritual father that has so much to teach. We spoke the other day, and I can't wait to collaborate on some deeper topics in the future. Please subscribe to his channel.
Thank God. I really appreciate what Tribulation Saints is doing too. He's doing great work, so you should definitely check out his channel. He's got a very keen insight to what's going on in the world today, and is able to articulate it very clearly. So yeah, good work. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks so much for swinging by, and thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Templar, always love seeing Templar here. This was a Anglican gentleman that followed my channel when I was a Protestant, and he is now an Orthodox catechumen. So praise God. Templar says, asks a question: best publishing press for a large, well-made collection of Orthodox books. I am a collector wanting to collect something aesthetic for my study.
Well, there's so many. I mean, I know having been in having gone to Jordanville, of course, I'm partial to Holy Trinity Monastery publications. So that would be one, of course. New Rome Press is recent. They do some beautiful work. The language is not the typical King James. They you yours versus thee thou, but the books are just incredible. If you're looking from the aesthetic part, I mean, they've got some of those beautiful books out there. Obviously, Father Peter Hears, great work that he's doing with his publishing house. So I definitely recommend his the books that he's putting out there. And really, that's there's so many. It's really hard to get a good answer on that. I mean, there's from an aesthetic perspective, those are the main ones I go to. That's where most of my books come from.
Yeah, I like Father Here's press, the Uncut Mountain Press.
Uncut Mountain,
they have a good collection. They just released a 2-volume series. Errors of the Latins is a massive 2-volume series. The books are huge. I would check that out. Apparently, it's supposed to have. I mean, it's like it was a kind of like a labor of love by one of the. It was I forget who it was. It was one of Jay's friends that had went through and they had broken down basically just a whole bunch of defeater arguments for Rome. So I heard him talking about that on his stream the other day. I really wanted to check it out. I remember Father Hears had messaged me and he was like, I'm going to send you like a calendar or something. If there's anything that you want, let me know. I'm like, maybe the very expensive 2-volume set there. Anyway, exactly. No, I didn't want to ask him for that. It's like, well, if you're asking, anyway, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Hollow ending question. How do we approach those who are cold to the Orthodox Church and life besides trying our best to lead with humility and living the Orthodox faith? Which is the most important? Or rather, what can we say, I guess, to somebody who's cold to the church?
So if I understand the question correctly, what do we say to them? Somebody who's cold? Is that, I guess, the context
That's what
there?
it seems like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. I love it. The thing I think, first of all, is that we have to realize that everybody has free will. So like from your perspective, let's start with you, right? Let's start from how you're coming at the discussion. Even God himself won't force somebody's will. So we have to remember that we can't force anybody's will either. The kind of exceptions to that, obviously, children, right? If we have children or people in our charge, I mean, there's a certain degree of that to help form them, right? As a priest, I mean, there's things that I can influence or would try to bind certain standards or whatever people to certain standards. But in terms of something like this, without more context, like is this your spouse? Is this a friend? I'm presuming it just based on what I read here is probably just a friend or somebody rather than somebody that's very close to you. Obviously, that's a little bit different discussion if it's somebody that's very close to you. But I'd say that the simple answer to this is just to be warm with them, right? Like, you can't, you can't give somebody something that you yourself don't have, right? So if you're not warm in the faith, you're not living in the spirit of Christian, humble charity, humble love, then there's no way you could expect that of someone else. So first of all, look to yourself and look to see what you can do different. And yeah, just be that, be long suffering with them, because I'm guessing, I mean, just once again, reading between the lines here, somebody who's cold to the Orthodox Church in life. I don't know if they're lapsed Orthodox. I don't know. Once again, those are all kind of helpful context, but I would say, in general, people come to Orthodoxy probably more than any other reason because of they see in us something that they want for themselves, right? When you strip all the layers, I'm not saying these other things, we were talking about debates and like they have their place, but really when push comes to shove, people want what we have. And if we're not a good bearer of that goodness, right, then we're not going to be effective, in converting anyone, that we're not good stewards of this faith this gift that we've received. And so I would say that's the most important part of this. You're living it, you're long suffering. If they are uncharitable towards you, you don't give as you get, sometimes, that's necessary. I'm not saying in every case. Sometimes we need to push back. I mean, nobody's saying, hey, be a doormat. Nobody's saying, but there are times and circumstances why I don't know. Is this a family member? It's a little bit different. It's a family member. We have to tolerate more with our family, typically than others. Once again, there's limits to that too. I'm not saying, hey, I'm not for abuse. Okay. I mean, to be clear, but there are many instances in the lives of the saints of people that bore their sufferings well, and their bearing of those sufferings are ultimately what converted their spouse or whoever, So if this is a spouse that we're talking about, you have to live the faith and not give them any reason to question their faith because of your life. Live your faith to the fullest. And that's the best thing you can do for them. There's not really anything more. Pray for them, of course, with your whole heart, and make sacrifices, do penance, like when I say penance, like vigils, asceticism, right? You're repenting of your sins, and you're, humbling yourself before God, and you're fasting, and you're doing all the things that in Orthodoxy is expected of us. You're living this life to the fullest. And that's the best thing you can do.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing to add on to that from my own experience is one of the things that's very striking to me as somebody coming from a Protestant background into the Orthodox Church is the hospitality is very beautiful. So I think lean into that, because that's something that's really lacking in the West. This was really demonstrated in a very beautiful way. John Here's Father Peter Here's brother hosted a Supra, a Georgian Supra, and I was privileged to be able to attend that, and that was a beautiful, beautiful, very. I mean, it's very liturgical. You do the toasts to, the various segments in the Supras, like various toasts, so on and so forth. But it was such a beautiful example of hospitality and fellowship, and I mean, it's just very striking, and something that I think is very lacking in the West. I'm gonna bring him on the show to talk about that specific Georgian tradition. So it was very beautiful. But then also, just with the coffee hours and things like that, it's like a full meal. you go to church, and it's like, okay, well, we're all gonna have lunch together. We're all gonna talk together. And then maybe something small that kind of pops into my mind is I always feel appreciative, because obviously I can't participate in the Eucharist until I'm received into the church. But with the blessed bread, going and giving that to some, if that's your local church's custom, going and giving that to the people that aren't going forward, I feel like that's another good act of hospitality. But the hospitality piece is huge. I mean, that really did, I think, touch me in a profound way attending the Supra. Afterwards, I was just sitting there, and I was like, I can't quite wrap my mind around how profound this experience was. And but yeah, that'll be an interesting discussion to have him on and talk about that. But
yeah, for sure. And just to your point, real brief. I mean, yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's instructive for the parishes as well. I can't, obviously all parishes are different, but like in our own parish, just speaking for our own parish, Sunday is an all day affair for us. I mean, we're there all day. Like this isn't, you don't just, I mean, not everybody has to stay. You're not required, don't like lock the gates and keep you in or something. Right. But like it is normal for a number of people to stay throughout the day and, conversations we didn't have a chance to have the night before, after vigil, things of this nature, confessions, even. It's really important to develop the spirit of a family, like a family-like spirit in the parish, where people want to hang out together. That's the point. Like they don't want to leave, right? That's, I think, something every parish should cultivate to the degree that they're able to, and it seems to yield good fruit in our parish. So, to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of the exact feeling. It was like this is a family,
Hmm.
This is a family that I want to be a part of. The more we can foster that, I think in Orthodoxy, the more people are going to be drawn to it in a very profound way, and not be
Hmm.
isolated. Because there are people who will come to an intellectual understanding of like, okay, well, I believe Orthodoxy is true, but then they remain introverted. They don't make friends. They just go on Sunday and go home or something.
Yeah,
But it's a
they're missing
completely
out.
different. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say they're missing out. I mean, it's nobody can compel them to do that, but they are really missing. Orthodoxy is communal. It's a communal faith, and you're missing something by bailing out. And I understand some people are just they're socially awkward or whatever. But look, this is your family. You should be there, spend time, get to know them, be a part of things, and that will help you develop spiritually. Presuming the conversation's edifying. Look, it's Sunday, so it's a little admonition here, like we should have good elevated conversation as well. If the conversation is low, okay, that's not how we do it, right? Sunday, let's, should do it every day. We should obviously never go low, but especially on Sunday, we should have elevated conversations, maybe keep the politics out of things and all that. So it's really an edifying experience for everybody who's there.
Mm. So debate everyone at coffee hour
Yeah, there you
immediately.
go. Exactly.
Nice. All right, here's a good question. Father Bless, can you
May the Lord bless.
explain why some Orthodox churches have either 73 or 76 books in the Bible? It
Mhm.
doesn't seem unified for others looking to Orthodoxy versus something like the Catholic Church.
Yeah, this is there's such a different spirit here between the faiths. So just to understand, like to give context to that, to the answering of the question, the canon of the scriptures was something that developed over time. The first instance we have, I believe, was from like 368, with a letter from I believe it was Saint Athanasius. And but in some churches, you didn't have it get finalized. I want to say until maybe even the 10th century. I think the Ethiopians didn't, like, a revelation was a big one that didn't factor in until much later. And so, but the thing about why it's not a big deal for us is because remember that um, the scriptures don't bring forth the church, but the church brings forth the scriptures. Okay, so it's a whole different mentality. If you're coming from a Protestant mentality, which is the Bible, is what is our sole rule of faith, and that determines everything for us. Well, obviously, it's gonna be a big problem for you, but and really, it shouldn't be, because we're talking about some books in the Old Testament. Um, obviously, the basis of this is the Masoretic versus the Septuagint. So Orthodox, in the Orthodox Church, we follow the Septuagint rather than Masoretic. The Masoretic is what the Jews used. It wasn't converted to Greek. Septuagint is the Old Testament that had been converted by Greek Jews, basically, in the 200 or 300 BC, 200 or 300 years before Christ. So that's what the Orthodox Church uses. There's various reasons for this. One is because at least one of the arguments I've heard for this, and it seems right, a little bit of research I've done on it, is that after, obviously, Christianity was established, the Jews, there's, in the prophetic books especially, there's so many references that to Christ, that he's so perfectly fulfilled, right? That this was kind of bad for the Jews, and so there were certain things that they changed. One thing that comes to mind was when referring to, I believe it was in Isaiah, a virgin shall conceive. And so they changed, the connotation Septuagint is virgin as we would understand virgin. But in the Masoretic, they changed it to like maiden, like a young girl. Because of course that changes the whole dynamics of what took place there, the miraculous birth of Christ. So So we follow anyway. So we follow the Greek, the Septuagint, rather than the Masoretic, and a lot of Protestant Bibles are based on the Masoretic. And of course, then there's the whole quote unquote apocrypha, right? The Bibles that the books that Luther just cut out, that was or didn't want to have in there. I guess the original, if I'm not mistaken, the original Bibles actually had it in there, but eventually they just dispensed with it. But that's not surprising in one sense because, when you make yourself the authority of the church, right? I mean, that's really what Protestants. I talked about this in another video. Actually, the one that I think you saw that led you to want to, right? There was a video that you saw, the 4 fundamental flaws. I discussed that in there briefly, but I won't. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if any Orthodox churches hold to a 73 book canon. Aren't they all 76 verses, maybe 77 with the Georgian canon with an extra Maccabees?
Yeah, but once again, there's a 76, but we don't. Once again, it's not a big deal. Like if somebody had one with 73, it's not like you'd have to get rid of it, right, and not use it. It's not. These are, yes, it should be 76 books, but once again, because you had different churches using different canons for centuries. It's not something we get all that hung up about. Once again, the church is what is going. The scriptures are the divinely inspired word of God. We understand it as that. So we don't. It's not like this is not to denigrate it, but understand, for those who don't know this, is that scripture is a part of tradition. Unlike the Catholic view that has scripture and tradition, right? They look at these as both as like, okay, there is, once again, it's a dichotomy. Okay. The Catholic model is the sources of divine revelation are scripture and tradition. In Orthodoxy, we don't make that distinction. It's all holy tradition, and scripture is a part of that holy tradition. So, and it's up to the church, it's up to that tradition to determine what books are canonical or not. And once again, we're talking about a couple of books in the Old Testament that, obviously all scripture is important. And so we would use the 76 books, but if somebody had the 73, it's not like you can't use it. I'm going to have to get rid of my Bible. And, in Orthodox, we typically use the Orthodox Study Bible. That's the main one, which is based on the New King James. So, but I have multiple Bibles. So, I mean, I don't, it's nice to see some other translations and stuff. And honestly, that's one of the beautiful things about being Orthodox. Like we're not reliant on, right? It's not a translation alone that's going to determine what we believe on things. It's what the church itself has established, and the scriptures for edification. It's to help us, further appreciate and have the context of the teachings of the church.
Yeah. Sorry, kind of froze a little bit there, but
okay.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a difference between like your personal Bible that you're using and the canon that the church accepts, right? Like, so yeah, I agree. Usually it's what New King James is the official, what typically the Orthodox will use.
It's what it's based
Orthodox
off
Study
of.
Bible for the
It's based on that one, yeah.
Yeah, the OSB I think uses the New
Mhm.
King James.
Mhm.
Question: where does Cleve get his shirts, and are the sizes correct? Amazon, man, Amazon. Well, one of them was from Walmart actually. They had a whole bunch of these. So I'm a Florida boy, so they have a whole bunch of like palm tree style polos for sale local. So some of them are on Amazon though. But yeah, I went and I got a whole bunch of them all at once. I really like. I actually dig this style a lot. After the usual suspects, what books do you recommend for inquirers and catechumens, especially for lives of particular saints? Also, catechism, apologetics type stuff, if you wish. He says the usual suspects were, let me see if I remember, Rock and Sand, Lives of the Apostles.
Yeah, I have a whole different list that I go by, and that's not to take anything away from those. Those are great books. But the first book that we do is from what I'll do is actually, because it's kind of hard to find. If I give you the title, you might not be able to find it. So I'll post a link to it maybe in the comments on this. But it's a book by Saint Justin Popovic, Life in Christ, and it's outstanding in being able to help somebody develop this framework. So I have 3 stages to my catechumenate process in terms of the intellectual side, or the academic side. So the first one is Saint Justin. Ideally, that's what we start with. And And that helps somebody to develop an Orthodox worldview, like how to approach the world and understand it through an Orthodox framework. The second book that we do then is The Law of God, the one from Holy Trinity Monastery Press, because of course we're ROCOR, and that's our standard catechism. That's the gold standard for the basics of the faith, that goes through the creed and basic obligations and prayer and all the different. It goes through the Bible, the different stories, and it's just very, very good. It's very good for establishing the nuts and bolts of what one needs to do to be Orthodox. And the last one that we've done that I think is the best, I mean, we've done other ones, but I like it a lot. I think it's the best for like catechumen level, is Illness and Cure of the Soul by Hiriathos Vlachos. That's a real, it's question and answer. He has another one, Orthodox Spirituality, which is also quite good for laying out sort of like systematically what the spirit, how to pursue the spiritual life. The Illness and Cure of the Soul is a series of discussions that he had, and I mean they're both fine books for a catechumen level. I'd say the Illness, if you can find it, it's kind of hard to find it. You have to get out of Greece. Like I said, I can post links to these, but it's a most people find it to be really approachable. If somebody's super systematic, maybe if you are a more intellectually based, you might prefer Orthodox spirituality. But why that's good is because you kind of get the why with St. Justin, then you get the what with the Law of God, and then you get the how with the Illness and Cure of the Soul. And there's many, many good books after that, but that's what we use in our catechumenate. And I make sure everybody at least has those books, even if we're not able to get through all of them. And obviously people come in all different stages, so we have to work with people once again who they are. But I want to make sure they have at least all three of those books. And it really will give you a good foundation. Apologetics, just to answer the apologetics piece, there is literally a book called Orthodox Apologetics. If you can find it, I'll try to post a link to that as well in one of the comments. Or maybe you can post it. I can send them to you. You can post it in the description, however you want to do that. But that's a good book for that. But I think honestly, for me, the best Orthodox apologetics is living the faith. I'm just going to come back to that. Like, when you've been Orthodox for some time, then you get it. Like, you're never really going to get Orthodoxy until you've lived it. All of the other work that's done is to, I think, help people get over the intellectual barriers that they have to go and join a church. That's how it was for me. It took me a couple of years. The other book I guess I will mention, I've mentioned it elsewhere, the book that did help me a lot get over my own personal struggles was Two Paths by Michael Welton. If you're coming from a traditional Catholic background, that is the best book for getting over working through some of those obstacles. So anybody that's seen the Roots video, that the catalyst for me was not anything I read. It was an experience that I had in the Tomb of the Holy Sepulchre. If you haven't watched that video yet, you should go over there and check it out. But after I had that experience, then I needed to work through the doctrinal issues, and it took me about 1.5 years. But that book really, really sealed the deal for me and helped me to get over the hump. And once I did, it was living the faith. It was, years after the fact that I really could start to appreciate what I had. And so sometimes, the leap of faith, the willingness to try it out is kind of the most important part. And once you've lived it for a while, this stuff will really start to make sense for you. And that's, like I say, to me, the best apologetics.
I'll pull this one up because it ties right into what you were just saying.
Perfect.
And then I'll go back to this gentleman's super chat. Question: as a former traditional Roman Catholic like myself, just recently baptized a few months ago, what was the hardest thing to shed even after conversion?
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Definitely what we were just talking about is this intellectual approach to everything, trying to conform everything to the mind, trying to have everything make sense. It's just not, God is mystical. God is infinite. He's beyond our ability to comprehend him. And the faith that he's given us, likewise, many elements of it are beyond our ability to comprehend him. So the hardest thing really is just letting go of the need to be able to fit everything in a box. And I would say that's the biggest problem of Catholicism, the thing that essentially made it go off the rails. I believe very strongly in this, that its fundamental flaw was this idea of subjecting the faith to reason. I know they would deny that. I know they'd argue against it, but I mean, when you read the Summa, it's a prime example. I mean, that's what it is. That's what scholasticism does, is it forces the faith into its rational box, into various rational boxes. And, You know, as much as I loved that at the time, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's like a fun exercise, as I've said elsewhere, but it just isn't true. There's just things now you have to make up. There's things that you have to force to make it fit in the box. You have to change it. And then once you've done that, you've destroyed the integrity of the thing itself. You know, in Orthodoxy, we're not trying to murder to dissect. We're trying to appreciate the mystery and its integrity, right? So I've talked about it elsewhere. I won't get into it again, but you know, about the, you know, dissecting the frog or whatever. Like, you know, it's just the thing that we want to understand it in its true sense, not in its according to its parts, right? We want to see it live and organically, the way it occurs in reality. And so work towards that. Work towards acceptance of the fact that there are things that you're just not going to understand. And when God decides that you need to know, then he'll give you that enlightenment. He'll teach you the proper way of understanding it. But once again, that's why the humility is so important, especially coming into the church, because you just don't know. Like I said, 10 years and even, you know, and then going to seminary, and there's other things that get revealed. There's so much that you don't realize. It'll occasionally happen even today, you know, whatever, 16, 17 years into this, into being Orthodox Christian, where like, oh yeah, I have to reorient that, right? Because it's just something I haven't thought about in that many years. And then it pops up and I'm like, that's not Orthodox. That doesn't fit this model. So just be open to that. Be open to the fact that you don't know, and that not everything is going to fit your mind. And that the royal path, you know, it skirts those extremes. Most of the time it's not either or, it's both and. It's these things joined together in a way that they don't lose their identity, but they're able to exist as a union, right? So it's the faith and works. It's a good, you know, just to kind of give an example to this. I've talked about this and I've done a video on this as well. You know, faith versus works. It's not a true dichotomy, right? It's all one and the same. If you have faith, you have works, right? The works are the expression of faith. So we don't set up this false dichotomy. Oh, you can have faith, you can have works. No, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. When you have faith, works are a natural result of that faith, right? So that's the Orthodox mindset, is this unification of these concepts. And the only thing that doesn't fit that model, of course, is sin, right? Because sin doesn't have a true existence. Anything that God created is good, and sin is the only thing that exists outside of that, because it is outside of that. It's not ontological.
Right. It's a privation.
Privation of the good, right? A lack of a good word should be present, or a perversion of the good, you know, a parasitic element.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm noticing quite a few. Originally, when I first announced my intentions to become Orthodox, I got a lot of Protestants reaching out that were interested in Orthodoxy, and obviously, my answer to them is, "Let me connect you with a priest." But
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, more recently, it's been traditional Roman Catholics that are reaching out, usually, you know, either in the DMs or emails. I think there's a lot of interest amongst traditional Roman Catholics right now, seeing, you know, some, obviously, I think maybe some of the modern current events are pushing them in that direction, but I think that is a beautiful thing to see. So that testimony is probably going
Definitely.
to come in handy very soon, as we see a wave
Yeah.
of even more traditional Roman Catholics
Yeah, for sure.
getting
Yeah,
interested in
thank God.
Orthodoxy.
Yeah, thank God.
Here's a very
Oh
interesting
boy.
inquirer question: could the Father exist without the Son?
All right. So my first thing is why ask that question? I mean, that's the thing with these things. Like, we don't want to fall into, like, one of the things that, once again, it was enjoyable as a Catholic, but I also realized the danger and the problem with it is these speculative questions, right? The whole, you know, joke, how many angels can you fit on the head of a pin, right? You know, in fact, I still have it somewhere, Disputed Questions on Truth, the De Veritate by St. Thomas Aquinas, you know, from the Catholics, right? He's not a saint in our church, but they would call him a saint. That is, you know, the Disputed Questions on Truth. There's just all these questions, right? And so, you know, the issue is that led to a lot of the problems, right? When God becomes this item of inquiry, right? This item of inquiry that we just want to try to break down to fit in our mind, that can be problematic. And another example of that is, like, when you talk about Trinity, when you talk about the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, all of the false analogies, right, that come in about when people try to explain the Trinity by means of analogy,
Right.
they almost always get it wrong. So, the only analogy that I'm aware of that is, approved by the fathers is that of the three sunlight. That's the analogy that is given. Three sunlight occurs in our prayers. And so, and that's from the fathers. I want to say, I believe it's from St. Gregory, if I'm not mistaken. And so my point is that we want to make sure, first of all, if we're asking a question like this, what is our intent in trying to have it? So I would just say, to try to answer the question, the Father, if the Father had chose, right, if God, as God, had chose to not, right, have the Son begotten, right, and have the Holy Spirit proceed, right, then it's certainly possible, I think, that God could have chose. God is not bound, right, by the rules that we would think of. God is not bound by really anything. God is beyond all these things. But it is the essence of God to exist as three persons. And so that's the God we have. So, and it's not really much of an answer, but from the standpoint of the question, I don't want to be rude, but once again, from our perspective, it's just not an important, from my perspective, at least personally, maybe it's just a personal thing. It's not something that I really need to think about. I know through grace, through my holy faith, that we have one God in three persons, right? One essence and three hypostases, and that's what I care about. So to try to probe deeper than that, it's just not something I'm interested in. I'm thankful that God has given me this faith, and that's really as far as I need to go. Somebody, some theologian, established, like legitimate theologian, somebody's devoted a life to this. Maybe they can have those conversations, but for us, my interest isn't living this faith that I've received.
Can God make a rock so big he cannot lift it up?
I know. These are just pointless, and they're just pointless discussion. No offense. I don't mean to be offensive, but I just, ultimately I have to wonder what the intention of somebody asks a question like that. Maybe it's legitimate. I don't want to judge anybody, but in my own personal experience, when I've engaged with people that ask things like that, usually it's coming from a perspective that's not good.
Yeah. He says thanks for the answer, much appreciated. So he appreciates.
Okay, well, thank God.
All right, let's see. All right, here you go. Inquire a question. What was the church called before the Great Schism?
In the community, yeah, well, just one church. Really, it would have been, probably, if you were going to make distinctions, it would have been based on the church, whatever the territory was. So the Church of Rome, the Church of the Church of Constantinople, the Alexandrian Church, the Antiochian Church. But these were churches not like we understand it today, where, unfortunately, in the American experience, we have everybody here, right? That's not how it worked, of course, in the ancient world. In the ancient world, if you lived anywhere within the territory of Antioch, you were part of the Antiochian or Orthodox Church, and the same for any Jerusalem Patriarchate. Like all these patriarchates, that was the territory in which you lived, and Rome was just one of those territories. It had the primacy of honor. Obviously, it was considered the first see until it fell into schism. But the point is that it wouldn't have been a distinction in the Church of the West, the Church of Rome. I mean, that's versus the Church of Antioch, or the Church of Jerusalem. You see some of that Church of Corinth and the Church of Ephesus, right, in the scriptures with St. Paul. So you'd be identified based on your territory, wherever it was that you lived or were part of the faith. So that came about, as far as I know. I mean, maybe there's some historical anachronism I'm unfamiliar with, but the Catholic/Orthodox distinction just came about as a way of distinguishing the Church of the West from all the rest of the church, right? Because remember, the Patriarch of Rome was only one out of 5 patriarchates. So, Rome, from our perspective, of course, separated from the rest of the Orthodox Church. So it's kind of an irony, actually, in a sense, that they chose Catholicism as their modifier, right? Their adjective to modify, because realistically, they're one of the 5. So, in terms of the marks of the church, one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic, it's interesting that they would have chose the Catholic when they, once again, were only one of the 5 C's in the church. I mean, we would have had a greater claim to that title than they would have, but obviously they did, they did what they did. Beyond that, it was one Christian church, right? There wasn't this distinction, and they chose, I guess I would say this too, they probably chose the universal, because Catholic, of course, means universal. They probably chose that because of their emphasis, right? Think about Catholicism in principle, and this distinguished the church long before the schism, is the fact that they one language, like they're very focused on conforming everything to the law, right? Because let's face it, they were born out of the Roman mentality, the original old Rome, not new Rome, okay, Byzantium, not the Greek, but what we typically today think of as Rome. What was Rome known for? It was known for its laws, for its order, for all these things, and that mentality persisted in the Church of the West, in the Roman Church, the Latin Church. That's not, so there's a reason. Like the schism did just happen out of the blue. There are, of course, many factors that contributed to it. The separation from the rest of the East, communication wise, that was an element of it. The two churches just grew separate for centuries. And other political things, obviously the Carolingian order of things, the kings and all, like Charlemagne, and the leading into the Holy Roman Emperors, and all this, this political machinations and all the things that were going on there. So there's a lot of factors that contributed to it, but basically, the point being is that it would have just been one church before then. They would have been distinguished by where they were at, and this idea of universality. I think they chose that because, once again, they're just all about order and about rules, and they're about, it's why, for example, every priest is going to tell you the same thing in the confessional, or at least traditionally. When the Catholic Church operated like the Catholic Church did, now I don't know what it does. And post Vatican II, it's like all over the place. But previous to Vatican II, when the Catholic Church had order and it had structure, despite its its heresies and its other problems, it nevertheless had that sort of like sense of everything is one way and one language, right? Throughout the world was Latin, right? They had one language. Orthodoxy's never been about that. Orthodoxy's always been about to the person. It's been more to the person. It's been, that's why the Russian church has a slightly different liturgical practice than the Greek church or the Arabic churches, the Antiochians and stuff today. It's obviously, it's minor t, small t traditions, but that's why there's a difference. That's why our chant, for example, Russian chant sounds more like polyphony, right? Because there is some influences from the West, not in a bad, I don't mean that in a bad sense, but there's different influences versus the Byzantine church has the more simple chant and that sort of thing. So does that make sense? Kind of answer it, hopefully.
Yep, absolutely. You got some comments in here that said, let me see if I can find that comment. It's kind of up here. I love that Father Sebastian's answers are so detailed.
Thank God.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. I like that we explore it from different angles as well. I think like a simple answer would just be, was called the Catholic Church, which means universal because we're all one church. But I like that. I like that you're going into detail with the inquirer questions, because I think that certainly helps people who may genuinely not know. Maybe this is the first time that they are looking into Orthodoxy, or everybody's kind of in a different spot. So I appreciate that.
Thank God.
Let's see. So just a reminder, everybody, we're probably going to go for about 2 hours in the stream, so maybe another 30 minutes. If you want to send your questions in, send them in with a Q. Let me know if you're Q in front, rather. Let me know if you're an inquirer, where you're at with it. And then if you want to skip in line, you can send a super chat, and I'll to say thank you. I'll pull those up first. Here's a good question here. The next one down on the list. I'm just going in the order in which they're received right now.
Okay.
Question, Cleve, when you were Protestant, did you often try to masquerade holy curiosity as noble criticism, trying to present yourself as prestigious when in reality you were curious, anxious? No, I'm very stubborn. I'm a very stubborn man. It took the Theotokos having to grab me by the scruff of the neck and shake me up a bit. So no, I was never anxious. I was never I don't know. I felt like what I believed was true until I didn't, and then once I knew that Orthodoxy was true, that's just kind of is what it is. And I wouldn't change anything about that either. That's just kind of, I feel like there are people who try to, I don't know, they look at somebody's journey and they'll try to like rationalize what's going on in the background, but no, that was really never the case with me. I've said in other interviews as well, I've never been an anxious person. I'm always pretty level-headed. I like to think things through. I don't like to make decisions rashly. Um, but yeah, I am stubborn. So that is one thing. So the Theotokos had to come and grab me by the scruff of the neck a little bit. But good question. Um, thoughts thoughts on the Nicene Creed commemoration ceremony? I guess it's going on in Turkey right now.
Oh, yeah, I haven't followed any of that. What's the context of that?
Well, it's going on. So
Okay, yeah, yeah. I don't know,
there
and
you go.
I guess I missed that one. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right. That's funny.
I'm real core, so we're kind of we just kind of keep our head down. A lot of the stuff going on with the ecumenical patriarch, quote unquote, the EP and everything. It's yeah, we don't get too involved in that. So
Octavian, if a Catholic lurks in Orthodox chats, but Allah doesn't know is a sin. Okay. Good to see you all. That's funny. Okay. This is a kind of I get this question a lot actually. Question. Is online orthodoxy possible, Father, if I have not a single parish in my country? We have a
what country?
priest. He seems to be too busy as well. 1,200 miles distance.
Wow.
I'm not.
I wonder what
I'm not sure what
country that
country
is.
it is in.
Hmm. Wow. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. Obviously, yeah. I mean, orthodoxy's in one sense, God doesn't abandon anyone. So let's establish that baseline that God's going to work with everyone where they are. Obviously, my next question is, is there any chance that you could move, right? I mean, to be closer to that parish. This is really one of these kind of conversations I'd want to have it with you in person, to be frank. The general thing is obviously one needs to be baptized. You need to get baptized, and you need to know the faith and accept it fully. And so yeah, you would need to have someone baptize you to come into the church. But as far as living that faith, I mean, anything's possible with grace, but it's hard enough. The other side of that is it's hard enough even having access to, weekly sacraments. Living the Orthodox faith, as I've said elsewhere, is incredibly difficult if you do it right. Go ahead. You have a thought?
Someone in the chat says he is from India. He answered us earlier.
Oh,
I didn't see
okay. Okay. Yeah. That's something you need to reach out to a particular priest. My advice on that would be to reach out to a particular priest. Obviously, if this priest is 1,200 miles away, he's probably very busy. He's probably got people if he's one parish, so maybe just be patient with him. But you might be able to do some of the instruction elsewhere, and then maybe just go there for baptism. Maybe he knows somebody in the area. Maybe there's a priest without a parish, or somebody's going to travel through the area. If you are serious about becoming Orthodox, and you pray, you humble yourself before God, and you pray thoroughly for guidance and the grace to come into the faith, it will happen somehow. So I would say just persevere in that. And if there's anything that, if you want to reach out to me offline through my own channel, whatever, that's fine. Or through my own parish website, I'm more than happy to talk with you. But yeah, that's something that is it's a tough situation. There's a lot of people that maybe not that far away, but there's situations where they don't have a parish nearby, and we always need to try to do whatever we can. If you're serious about the faith, do what you can to move. But I know that doesn't work for everyone. So especially in India, where I know there's a lot of poverty there. So I hope and pray God help you. God help you, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to help on a personal level.
Absolutely. I hope India becomes Orthodox. That would be a beautiful thing.
Indeed.
Here's an interesting question. I know this is probably different views out there on this issue.
There are.
But question, what is the view on concealed carry in church?
Yeah, boy, that's another really good question. Then there are opposing viewpoints. I know historically it was not allowed. Historically, I think even the Serbs who are have no issue with military stuff. I mean, the Serbs are known historically for having fierce warriors, in their church, and being perfectly fine with fighting when it's necessary. My understanding is even them historically, even they would they would stack their weapons, in the narthex before, entering the church, the nave of the church. It's obviously with a guard, I'm sure, watching them. I know today the situation is different. I know it has done a lot. So, personally, there needs to be there should be some security measures. I would say that. I would say we live in a time when, I'd say in general, the general thinking here is that we live in a time where there's not a respect for not only the church, but for the rule of law in general. And from the standpoint, not just physically, of course, but even spiritually, for a parish to go through something like that would just be tragic. Not everybody's ready to be martyred, right? So I'm a big proponent of a church security team where it's possible. However, I would say that the majority of those efforts usually should be focused on, just from a security perspective, you want to have people outside the church. Not to say you shouldn't have someone inside as well with that ability, but that person doesn't necessarily need to be, depending on the arrangement of your church. There's a lot of factors there. Okay, now I'm going to go back into my, I have a lot of experience in the security world. So, I mean, looking at it from a security perspective, you want to counter the threat at the greatest distance away from the faithful as possible. I mean, not to geek out too much on this kind of tactical stuff, but like I literally had a training company teaching these kind of things beforehand, before I was a priest. And one of the things we found, we actually use simunitions. I was a very high level trained. That's the way I was trained. I was trained with, for those who don't know, simunitions are they're like paintballs, but they shoot out of the actual guns. And so very, very high level of training. And what you find is that very often, if you go to the range, if somebody just goes to a shooting range and they just flat range shooting targets, it's completely inadequate to prepare you for the type of problem that you're going to face in a situation like that. God forbid. I mean, it's horrific to think about. That the likelihood, honestly, is that if you don't really know what you're doing, you haven't trained it, you're more likely to shoot your own people than you are the person, depending on a lot of factors. But you have to think, I don't want to turn this into a whole tactical discussion, but I'll just say this much. You have to think in the way that most people train. They're training on a target that is stationary, and you are stationary, right? A lot of ranges won't even let you shoot from the hip. You can't even draw and fire, right? You have to have the gun out. So there's all the issues of drawing and shooting. Now, let's say you're a competition shooter. Let's say somebody does a lot more. Then, of course, you're a lot better prepared. But even so, in a real engagement, your target is moving, you're probably moving, and there are people in the way that are also moving, that, and so so to be able to distinguish, to be able to take in all the information and be able to get to a position where you have a shot where you're not going to potentially shoot one of your own people, it's very, very tough. This is not something that, hey, a guy just gets a gun and he goes to church and he's prepared to defend the church. It's so much more involved than that. And if you don't train it, you don't practice, you don't actually run scenarios. And we did a lot of scenario training, both in terms of my own background, and as well as my training company. And people under stress do really, really dumb things. And that's not to degrade them, to denigrate them. It's the fact that it's really, really difficult. It's a lot more difficult than people realize. People have this idea that the guns are magical. I'm very much pro Second Amendment. Anybody knows me knows that I'm perfectly fine with that. I'll do a video someday on self-defense. There is more to it. It's not as simple as, it's always good. There's a range there too to understand. But in the situations where it's necessary, we really need to make sure we know what we're doing. And that happens through training. If you just buy the gun, it's not going to magically protect you. And I was up in Idaho. I'll just say, I'll end on this. I was up in Idaho when I had this company. And the reason I didn't do it for very long is because everybody up there just had this mentality. I got a gun, I'm good. I don't need to worry about training with it. And nothing could be further from the truth. When you've actually done legitimate stuff, you realize that, yeah, it's a lot more difficult than it looks like in the movies.
Right. Yeah, it's always been my fear. Is if in those types of situations, if you don't drill enough, that you accidentally end up hitting one of your own or something like that. Lord have mercy.
Mhm.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Something that you definitely need to, if you can't just get it and then expect. It's like that thought every guy has. It's like, look, I
Oh
want to be
yeah.
the hero. Okay.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if somebody if somebody approached me and there's like five guys, I'll just karate chop the one, take the other one down or something. That's not the way it works out.
No, it doesn't. Well, the last thing I'll
So
just say too is what people forget is a gunfight is a fight. In many instances, not many, but in some instances at least, you're not even gonna necessarily be able to get the gun out. Like some gunfights start when the weapon is still in the holster. You're fighting to get to your gun, like in
right.
close confines. So we trained all those things. We had the full contact suits, and we would, and you just see how people who think, and this is not, once again, not to denigrate anyone. We all, like you said, men in general are wired to think this way, that they're going to be the hero of their own movie. But the truth just unfortunately doesn't work out that way, in reality. If you until you train it, you don't realize how difficult and how much you're probably going to mess it up. And so I would just suggest, if you're going to go down that road and your priest allows it, obviously it needs to be with the blessing of your priest. You can't just go and do it. He has to be okay with it. But if you have the blessing of your priest, set up a security team, have somebody on the outside, because realistically, depending on the style of threat, it's much better to have that fight out in the parking lot than it is in the church, right? To keep that threat as far away from the faithful as necessary, as you can, So anyway, enough said there.
Absolutely. Yeah, great answers though. Um, Here you go. How to be more virtuous. I found myself lazing around. So how to break out of sloth.
Yeah, this is my whole channel is devoted to this kind of stuff. So I just can't just give one. There's not a simple answer to that. I mean, I could try to say just do these three things, but the reality of it is, if somebody is lazy, if somebody struggles with sloth, there's a lot more going on there typically, right? It could be sort of simple, but then again, look, here's the thing. If you know you're lazy, right? Then why aren't you, why not just be unlazy, right? Why not be motivated? Why not be virtuous, right? Like it's not as simple as just
Right.
knowing, right? It's a problem of the will. I literally just dropped a video today on willpower because on my channel, because this is like to address this exact point. God's will, God makes his actions somewhat, in a sense, contingent upon us. Like God is not going to force himself on us. He didn't have to do that, of course, but in order to unlock grace, in a sense, we have to correlate, right? In Holy Orthodoxy, we have this concept of the synergy, right? The synergy between God's will and our will. So it's not like maybe the Protestant, I'm not saying every Protestant thinks this way, but at least in modern experience, it seems like a lot of them do, where you just kick your feet up and God's gonna do everything for you, right? Like I don't need to do anything. God just does it all for me. And we're also don't take up the Catholic view, which is that, and it's kind of an unfair characterization, but a lot of people, even if the Catholic Church doesn't really teach this, people nevertheless come away with this impression that it's up to them, traditional Catholics, that it's really up to them in some sense. In Orthodoxy, what we would say is that, once again, it's this cooperation between God's will and our will. So the analogy I use in that video is that of a ship, right, of a sailing vessel, where it's the wind of grace, right, that's going to move us right to our destination, but we have to put the sail up, right? We have to do the work to hoist the sail, and we have to kind of move it so that it catches the wind, right? So there's this cooperation between the two. So the simple answer, if you want a simple answer, the best I can give you here in the quick 2-minute version is, of course, prayer and humility are the basis of everything. So pray for the ability to break out of the sloth. Okay, that's the first thing. And in that, humble yourself before God, right? So it's a humble prayer. My God, I can't do this on my own. Please give me the grace to work through this. And then the third thing is, take actionable steps, small steps, right? I go into more in my video, but like if you just look at the simple answer of willpower, a lot of it has to do with just establishing habits, right? Where once again, in our bench pressing analogy that I gave earlier, get good at lifting that 135 if that's all you can lift, and then add 5 pounds, add 10 pounds. If your goal is to say you get up too late, I don't know, I'm just going to make up an example. Like you get up too late in the morning. All right, well, say if you get up at whatever 9 o'clock and you want to get up early, we'll start getting up at like 8:45, right? And then you do that for a while. Then you get up at 8:30, or whatever it is, start with a baseline that you can actually do, and then try to do a little bit more. Once you've established, proficiency at that level, then try to do a little bit more. I mean, it's the same thing, once again, going back to the shooting analogy. We should never shoot faster than we can hit our targets with sufficient accuracy, right? So it's the same thing in the spiritual life. Like, we don't want to do more than what we can do proficiently, right? So be good about fasting as a primary example, right? If you try to fast more than you're ready for, and that's why we do the fast. Usually we should do that with the direction of our spiritual father, especially as a catechumen, right? Because sometimes they get super zealous and they go overboard, and then it creates problems. And God bless them for wanting and having all that that zeal. They want to do good, but they're just not ready for it yet. So it's up to the spiritual father to know the person and to be able to have a sense of what they can do. And so yeah, head over to my channel and watch that video if you can. We'll give you more context, but that's the quick, simple answer.
He followed up with, "Thank you, Father. I come from a Protestant background where the view is God does it all, and you just have to have faith. I'm now a catechumen trying to repent of my old ways."
Yeah, there you go. Right. God help you. God help you.
Here was one that came in more recently, but I thought this was a good one to jump into. David asks, question, my Protestant spouse is doubting her salvation after I explained Orthodoxy is the one true church. How do I comfort her while maintaining fidelity to the truth?
Wow, these are really pastoral questions. I'll be honest with you. This is one that I would want to answer in person with you. I'd want to sit down with if you were my parishioner, I would sit down and try to sit down with both you and your spouse and just have a conversation about it. That's honestly how I would deal with that. I would suggest that you go and do that with your priest if possible. Because honestly, it's these mixed marriages, like this happens a lot, where one person comes into the faith, the man or the wife, and it creates a lot of challenges for those couples. Yeah, you don't, as far as the discussion itself goes, I mean, yeah, you have to hold the line, but you also don't have to, once again, it comes back to, I think the first thing we talked about is speaking the truth in love, right? You love your spouse, but as a part of that love, it's divided. Like there's two ways, right? You express the love. You express your love to her in the sense that you want to see her, right, find the truth like you've been given, right, to have received the same gift that you've received. But you also have to respect her free will. Once again, not even God violates our free will. So in a sense, that whole, the whole thing about pearl, we haven't talked about this. It's probably good though. The whole, because it factors into this discussion about debates. The whole idea of pearls before swine, right? When that's mentioned in the scriptures, the pearls before swine. We never want to put, throw our pearls before swine. I think how that applies to this discussion is, I'm not saying your wife is swine, okay, to be clear, right? I'm just saying, but like the idea,
clip that
of,
right there, clip that.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure we're clear there. But the idea that you're giving something to somebody who's not ready for is really the point of the context here, right? There's an old expression, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm older, but a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, right? You can't convince somebody against their will. There's an element of will that enters into all of these things. And sure, ideally, if our ideas change, then our actions change. But if that were true, completely true, right, then we'd all be saints, right? Like, oh, I know that I know that I should live a certain way, so therefore I just live that way, right? Like the whole thing about laziness. I know I shouldn't be lazy, so therefore I won't be lazy, right? It's not that simple. I wish it was. There's an element, we can overcomplicate it too. The other side of that equation, we can absolutely make it more difficult than it needs to be. I mean, at its essence, it is kind of simple, but it's still difficult, right? It's not complicated, but it's difficult, right? You understand that distinction, hopefully. So anyway, I would just love your wife. Like, be a good example to her. You don't need to discuss, once again, you don't need to do apologetics with your wife right now. What you need to do is you need to let your wife see, rather than hear what you're saying, see the fruits of it in your actions, right? See you become more loving, more decent, more, whatever your deficiencies are. I don't know anything about you, of course, so maybe you already pretty supportive or whatever, but be a better husband, right, to her, and a better father to your children, if you have children. That's going to be, once again, people need to see, right? They need to see those changes and want those things. And the apologetics discussions, that really comes after somebody has the right disposition. Maybe that's another way of putting it. It's like, it's not that the discussion doesn't matter, but the disposition has to precede it, right? You have to have the disposition first, and then you have the discussion. because I knew about Orthodoxy. This is again just kind of circle back to my own story. I knew about Orthodoxy for many years before I became Orthodox. I almost came into Orthodoxy like, let's see, 10, 12 years earlier. I came pretty close. I was exposed to it, and I won't get into the reasons. Well, I guess I can. Maybe that's instructive, just real quick, because I think it pertains to your question. I was struggling. At this point, I was with SSPX. It was before I became Sedevacantist. It was in that in between period. I was starting to see the problems with the SSPX position.
Mm-hmm.
And so initially I didn't really know what to do. So I started looking into Orthodoxy. And I remember I went to some various churches. I went to a priest. I won't say who it was or where it was. Okay. But it's irrelevant. But I went to a priest and I started asking, I wanted him to explain to me about the Council of Florence, right? And all these different things that like, I kind of wanted it. I kind of wanted, Orthodoxy to be true, but I was just so hung up in my Catholic worldview, right? My Catholic approach to understanding things. That's what I'm saying. The framework of understanding was completely wrong. And so, and my disposition, once again, it came out of that worldview was wrong. So I went to this priest, this poor priest, I probably just honestly, as I think back, try to look at it now from, a different perspective as being an Orthodox priest now, I try to think, okay, well, what did he experience in me? And I probably just came in because, I was no different. I was just like all these young men coming in. I was super zealous and, full of intellectual curiosity. And, I was, I was in that world. I'm not in that world much anymore, but I was in that world then. And I wanted answers. Everything needed an answer. When I went to Thomas Aquinas College, I remember having a conversation with one of the students there that stuck with me for many years. And I've only recently, I say recently, whatever before I was a priest, come to terms with this. But the fact that, that his thing was that Catholicism is so reasonable that you can't help that as soon as you can answer every question. And as soon as you hear the answer, you have to be Catholic. And in that mode of thinking, because that is in the traditional world, they do really kind of subscribe to that. I mean, they try to answer every question. In Orthodoxy, we don't try to answer every question. We only answer the questions that we have to answer, and only following grace, following what's been revealed to us, right? We don't just make things up to fit a requirement, right? So all of this is to say that I wasn't ready, right? And so, I missed out on being Orthodox for 12 years because I didn't get the example. I didn't have, I didn't see what I needed to see there in terms of that side. And more importantly for you, I wasn't disposed. My will was not ready to embrace Orthodoxy. God had to work on me for another 12 years. So you got lucky. You got lucky, Cleve, that the Theotokos reached out to you when she did, and God's grace washed over you as early in this journey as it did. I mean, it took me much longer. So maybe it means I'm more stubborn than you. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I never had an inkling of wanting to become Roman Catholic. I don't know if you follow the channel at any point. I've been very critical, particularly in the realm of canon law and an application of canons. Roman Catholic system is not the same system as the first 1,000 years of the church. It's a complete deviation. The way that they apply doctrinal development is in complete opposition of the mindset of those who would apply the canons in the first 1,000 years of the church. I had a good conversation with Craig Truglia on this when I was a Protestant, and just going through some of the historical ways in which the canons were applied or not applied, and the ways in which canon law systems slightly develop over time is completely different than the Roman Catholic iteration of these canons flat out don't matter anymore because we're at this point in our theology now. Whereas the Orthodox mindset is it's economia versus acrovia. Like that, it's just as simple as that. It's the right of the bishop to be able to apply them. So I don't know. I've never really been tempted into the Roman Catholic realm whatsoever.
Well, the grace of your conversion, what I meant, the Theotokos. I'm just saying, as far as that grace of your conversion, because it's always going to be present. Like, let's never forget that in any conversion, it's always grace that's moving that. Now, once again, the things that we do can help provide the conditions, right? Like you're giving good soil for that seed of faith to grow, right? By living, living accordance to what following your conscience and these kind of things. But ultimately, it's grace that makes the difference here.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to have the little crack in the door, the noose. He says, he says, "Thank you, Father. I
Lord
appreciate
have
those
mercy.
words, especially how my wife is a swine." Oh, it's over.
Lord have mercy.
All right, so go back and clip that and show that to your wife. And that'd be
Yeah,
great.
there you go.
That's
Oh,
funny.
goodness.
All right, so we have one last question here to get to, and then we can wrap up. So Luca asks if Jesus and the apostles quoted from the Septuagint and the quote unquote Apocrypha, why do Protestants reject it and use the Masoretic text instead, which came later instead of the LXX?
You'd have to ask Protestants. I mean, I don't know why they do anything they do. I guess maybe you could answer this better. I mean, I'm guessing it maybe has something to do with the fact that in their perception, the Jews maybe in their minds were a better, because okay, it's translation. If everything matters to you, is translation is the most important thing because you want to make sure to get that word of God because you have nothing else as pure as possible. You don't want a translation of a translation. You want to have, just one translation and not like a photocopy. If people remember photocopies, right? The more you photocopy something, the worse it gets. So I don't know. Is there more to it than that?
Well, in the West, we have to remember that after about 405 AD, roughly, they began to use the Latin Vulgate, which was
Mhm.
translated from the Hebrew in certain areas. So they follow the tradition that was handed on to them basically after the time of Jerome. It
Mhm.
swaps a little bit. In the modern context, you might get different areas depending, or different reasonings depending. But I think at the very beginning, that's where it starts to deviate, is with the inception of the Latin Vulgate, and then the tradition that's handed down in the West, which makes sense because Protestantism is a branch off of
Catholicism.
Roman Catholicism. So,
Exactly. But one other
um,
thing too is I think it from a standpoint of economy, right? Because obviously the early books being printed, it seems like I remember something about there being certain commissions that removed the quote unquote apocrypha because the cost of printing. There were certain times that there was something about that where it was more pages you had to print, right? And they're trying to keep the cost down. It's like this idea of manufacturing efficiency. Since I've read that somewhere, but anyway, yeah. I mean, and just one further point on that. It's interesting because Protestants, unfortunately, no matter how much they want to be separate from Catholicism, the fact is their whole existence is tied to Catholicism, right? Like
right.
their religion exists as a reaction to that, which thereby ties them to it in a way that is far more intimate than they would probably like to acknowledge.
You know what? I'd like to add on that, if you don't mind us
Yeah,
going
great,
a
please.
little long.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this today, and this was a reflection. Um, I realized that one of the things I think that, because I mean, one, I am stubborn, but I was reflecting on the way that I would interact with objections when I was a Protestant, interact with objections to Protestantism. Um, and I think one of the bigger things was that since I was so entrenched in my community, I loved my local church. I still love the people there. My old senior pastor, I text back and forth, let him, hey man, I love you, dude. How are you doing?
Hmm.
How's the family? That kind of thing. We still keep up. Absolutely love the community. I would view, I think, and this might be, you were talking about this with Roman Catholicism. I would view any attack or objection rather to Protestantism as almost like an attack on the people
Yeah.
that I loved at the local church. So I'm like,
Hmm.
I would picture, and this is more of a subconscious thing. I picture that as like, this is something that, if it were true, takes me away from them. Therefore, it is an attack on my family. Therefore,
Hmm.
I'm going to defend it with tenacity. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people maybe subconsciously think the same way
Yeah, that's a great
uh,
point.
when
Yeah.
we're talking with Roman Catholics or Protestants. So I think that's the one thing that we have to acknowledge. At the end of the day, though, when I became fully convinced, that's probably the hardest thing for me, was the interpersonal
Mm.
relationships, because I was, obviously I was an associate pastor at my old church, was very plugged
Hmm.
in. Um, that was probably the hardest thing for me, but I didn't want to disobey God. At the end of the day, it's just, well, I love the people, but am I going to idolize interpersonal relationships over God?
Yeah.
And the answer for I mean, No, I mean, I'd rather die
Yeah,
than
no, that's the right spirit.
not obey him. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's the right spirit. That's the right spirit for sure. Yeah, to obey God over men.
Mhm.
So,
I th-
wow.
I think that is something to keep in mind though when we have these discussions. Is for some people, even if they probably aren't going to come out and say like, "Oh, you're attacking my family," but maybe in the
Yeah.
back of their mind, that's all the stuff that they're having to unravel while you're giving them the intellectual argument. Because if they follow your premise to its natural conclusion, which is that the Orthodox Church is the one true church, is the church that Christ established, that means, oh man, I'm going to have to change quite a bit, aren't I?
Mhm.
Right.
And
So,
all these people you care about and love now are like this guy with a wife are now in
mhm,
danger, right? In a sense, which is no, it's a hard. I mean, it's a proof that grace is required. We can't do this on our own. We
mhm,
can't do this on our own. I mean, there's so much. I mean, someone like me, I mean, I was almost 40 years old when I came into Orthodoxy. I mean, and I'm not just saying my case, I'm just one of obviously everybody has their story, but like there's a lot of things I had to like, wow, I've lived in error my, you know, my whole childhood and, all my adult life as well. Like that's, 40 years, you're pretty well set, by the time you get to 40 years old, you're pretty well set in your ways. So it's like a pretty radical transition that you have to make. And obviously he preps us. That's why I think, of course, like in my case, why it took an extra 12 years, because I just wasn't ready yet. Like I needed 12 more years of being humbled and all the things that go along with that, of to be able to accept it. So by the time I did receive it, I was ready to receive it. That's how it works within God's plan, and why we have to, acknowledge that and work, in his time and with other people, like, and be patient with others that we love and know that they're on a different timetable maybe. So
mhm. Absolutely. Question for you. Is it okay if I grab one last question here?
sure.
I think it's pertinent to entering into kind of the holiday season here. Battle Tears and Inquirer or Catechumen, I don't remember, one of the two. But good to see you again. Question: how do you handle not praying with non-Orthodox, especially if it's a close family member who loves to pray as a group for meals, events, and for personal things?
Yeah, kind of like going back to the question about the Christmas thing.
Mhm.
I mean, the safest, like once again, I want to be careful because I don't like to give like hard and fast answers to people that I don't know. Like I don't know what you're capable of, right? I don't know what your family, how they would deal with it, right? There's a lot of dynamics, and that's why I would say, the stock answer always is to talk to your spiritual father, because hopefully he knows you, he knows what you're capable of, he knows he has more context, right? I think this is really, once again, one of those kind of individual things. The general rule is that we don't want to pray with people that are not Orthodox, right? We don't want to join. We're not in communion with them, so we don't want to pretend like we are in communion with them, right? So that's the thing about praying with heretics or with the heterodox. But we love our family, right? And they love us, right? And they want to share, something. If they take their religion serious as we take our religion serious, right? In the same way we want to share our faith with them, they want to share their faith with us, right? This is the real difficulty. And so I'll just speak from my own case. I'll tell you what I do. Okay, I'll tell you what I do. My parents, my family knows they're still traditional Catholic. They're not Orthodox. They know obviously I'm a priest, but even before I was a priest, they knew obviously I was Orthodox. And I was able to have the conversation with them and just say, look, I love you as my parents, and I respect you as my parents, but I can't. We're not of the same faith. We're not in communion. We can't pray together as though we are. So, so they understand that and they let me say the prayers. And because once again, even as traditional Catholics, ironically, the ecumenical spirit, this is kind of the interesting thing. And
Mhm.
I don't make any further conclusions beyond this. It's just the fact that sometimes we get blamed for being, to your original point about being harsh or mean or whatever, like, oh, you Orthodox are more mean than everyone else because everyone else can accept you, but you won't accept anyone else. Well, it's because we're bound to it more. It's more clear to us that what our obligations are. In the modern Catholic Church that has adopted the spirit of ecumenism, right? They're perfectly fine with us. I mean, most modern day Catholics don't have any issues with the Orthodox. So in their mind, oh, we're all worship the same God. They have this mentality, which we as Orthodox wholly, to be clear, we wholly reject that. Okay. To be clear, that we do not accept that thinking whatsoever. And like I said, I did a whole video on that if you want to check it out. But the fact is that we still, that doesn't remove our obligation to charity, or the Ten Commandments, honoring our mother and father. So honoring them doesn't mean praying with them. It doesn't mean doing things with them or for them that are going to compromise us spiritually, but we still have to respect them. We still have to be charitable with them. So I would just have a conversation, I guess. I mean, once again, talk to your spiritual father first, but in terms of general advice, I would just have the conversation to say, I love you guys, but this is my situation. And I don't want to sin. I don't want to sin before God in doing this thing. And it can go one of several directions. They can either get really upset about it, or maybe it'll impress them. It depends. Once again, I don't know your circumstances. Sometimes people, a bold profession of the faith, whole and entire, without kid gloves, can oftentimes be the most powerful way to go. Once again, in a spirit of love, but like simple and direct. And I think it's necessary to not beat around the bush on certain things. If we try, oh, well, this and all of that, and try to explain it away, no, you just lost. Don't explain it away. We believe it. You present it. Once again, you present it in charity, love for them, but don't adulterate it. Don't, try to explain it away, right? This is the thing, but then all these other things. No, just say it for what it is. And they'll love you for it, or they'll maybe get upset about it. But either way, you've at least made it clear where you stand. And in time, hopefully they'll be able to accept it.
Yeah, see, I'm lucky, or I guess blessed, that since I was the only pastor in the family, they had me pray anyway. So
There you go.
so I just lead the prayer. They're kind of like, oh, he's the man of God in the family, so he just prays whenever everybody's together. So
there you go.
So that works out.
Great.
Good to see you. My wife, Roman Catholic, and I have been married for 20 years. For 19, she's been trying to get me to leave Protestantism. She was annoyed when I started inquiring into Eastern Orthodoxy. Now she's asking questions about it. Praise God, man.
All right. Glory to God. Yeah.
We've got a lot of inquirers in the chat too, so that's awesome to see.
That's great.
But thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a good stream. I'm glad the internet held up and we were able to get through the stream. So this is good.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what's going on there. So maybe we could talk about it offline afterwards and see if there's something that you saw on your end or whatever, but so we can avoid it in the future. But anyway, yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on here, and glory to God for all things.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you would like to plug or tell the audience about before we wrap up?
I guess just briefly, if you can, go to my website. It's just Father Sebastian, Orthodoxy in the Trenches, and that's my own channel now. And I have an online ministry. My real focus is in terms of my personal ministry outside of my parish. As real core priests, we have to provide. We do get something, but we also typically I have 7 children. I have a large family. And so a lot of us real core priests have to work outside of our churches as well. So I'm trying to get an online ministry, something that I've worked out over many years. It's just things that I've learned to help me through a lot of my own challenges. I've been through a lot of stuff myself, and so I've kind of compiled these things, and I'm in the process of developing them. But counseling services, I do those. And I've got a course and some different things I'm working on, really to help people that struggle with like addiction and difficulties, like hard vices, like things that they just can't get over. They're trying everything and they're just still really stuck. People today, unfortunately, they're not given the baseline, like the base foundation that people had even 50 years ago. And that's not to speak disparagingly of anyone. It's just the nature of our upbringing. The last couple of generations, it started, even before mine probably, but the last couple of generations they've not been raised with good habits. They've not been raised with, the foundation that people would have had just naturally, 50, 100 years ago. And so I think it makes it more challenging sometimes for them to live the faith, because the faith it's grace heals nature. But, a grace also builds on nature, right? So if nature, as you were saying initially, these young men that come into the church, they struggle. They have major struggles because they've been raised in a world that has just lied to them, right? And has taught them everything that's wrong, right? And is not given them the habits that they need, and that the discipline, the basic willpower, hasn't given them, the ability to make it easy. Not to say easy, it's never easy, but more practical to do the basic things of the faith. So what I offer is kind of a crutch. It's not something that somebody needs to do. Obviously, I mean, the grace is sufficient. The grace in the church is sufficient, of course, but it just might accelerate the process. To use the modern language, it's kind of a hack, right? So like, provide some hacks to make it maybe a little bit easier. Things that I've worked out over the years that have helped me to overcome some of my struggles that might be helpful to others. So that's unselfhelp.com. That's my website. And anyway, once again, thank you for letting me be here, and may the Lord bless you and your audience.
Thank you so much. Before I wrap up here, I just want to say thank you for the $5 super chat, X-Type Gaming. I missed this earlier. Thank you. Contemporary Compendium, thank you as well. I appreciate everybody who's donated to the stream. And then again, thank you for coming on. Do me a favor, when we wrap up, send me anything you want me to include in the description so they could check out your resources, because it sounds like that'll be an excellent resource for people who are struggling with any type of addiction. But I also already have your YouTube linked in the description. So if you would all that are watching, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe to his channel and show Father Sebastian some support and thank him for being here. But thank you all so much. Y'all have a good night. God bless.
Good night.